Hello, movie lovers. Welcome home. My name is Amy Henserling, and you are listening to Watch This List. I am very excited today because it is the launch of a brand new series, which was conceived after the theatrical experience of Poor Things for me. And then after Jetta saw it and loved it in the exact same way as I did, I was like, we're doing this. This is going to be a series that is focused on being a woman in whatever ways that sort of morphs into in today's culture, society, what have you. Jetta is the perfect woman to start this with. And I am calling it She Said, She Said. And part of the reason that I came up with that idea is in the structure of this. So what it is behind the scenes, just so you guys know, is Jetta chose a film, which is her She Said. And then in response to her film, I came up with mine. We both watched both of them. Actually, her film we watched together. And then my film, I think we just watched the same day, or at least within the same 24-hour period.
Mm-hmm.
But my films are going to be in response. So this is very much a dialogue, and it's like what themes sort of feed upon each other or complement each other, or perhaps maybe even contrast in a certain sense. In this example, I feel like it's like a continuation of Jetta's movie. But either way, I'm so excited. Hello, Jetta. How are you feeling?
Whew, excited. Very excited.
Yeah. I think this is something that like you and I would do even if I didn't do anything with this. Like we would just have this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And we do anyway. We're always talking about like women empowerment, being yourself, like sexuality.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel like this is such a natural fit. In the future, I'll have where every episode is me talking to another female. I'm really stoked about it. And I think it'll also sort of infuse my podcast up to this point. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. This feels like a natural progression from everything you already love talking about, everything I love talking about. It just feels right.
So, Jetta, you chose the to-do list, directed by Maggie Carey, who is actually both of our films were directed by females. Mm-hmm. What made you pick this out of everything that you could have chosen?
Well, this had a huge impact on me when I saw it. I think I first saw it about a decade ago. I think I got it on DVD right after it came out on DVD, probably from Netflix. It just felt so fun and so chaotic. And I think at the time, I just had a very different relationship to myself and a different understanding of sexuality than I do now. And I was so conditioned to think of sex comedies as something for boys, something for men, something that would always be like Porky's or Revenge of the Nerds or Animal House, or like all those movies where a boy's coming of age is the fun and goofy and stupid and silly one. And if girls came of age, it's a horror movie. Like basically,
like Carrie.
Yeah, like it's always going to be something traumatic. And I think that also extended to how I felt in actuality in real life, because I was very unsure of myself, just like generally not comfortable, confident, no self-esteem, probably self-worth. Like it was bad. And I had to go through a lot of therapy and a lot of thinking and understanding and analyzing and just coming to different feelings about myself to a place I am now, where now I just feel like I'm more the version of me I want to be than ever before. And now when I watch the to-do list, it's even funnier and even more relatable, because now it makes me feel even more confident in the vision of empowerment and determination that it has. Because now it doesn't just feel like, oh, that would be nice if I could do that. Now it feels like, yeah, I can do that. So that's kind of like the basis for why I wanted to pick it. It's a movie that I think will mean more and more to me, like the older I get, because I'll just be so delighted by everything that happens in it.
Well, and wouldn't you say it's kind of got like, as much as it is about her, about Aubrey Plaza's character, it is also very Judd Apatow SNL-ish. I mean, there is a lot of like boy humor, I want to say. Or like,
yes.
do you know what I mean? There's a lot of like elements to it that I think have the elements that you're describing, like Porky's and like male sort of coming of age movies where there's like potty humor, not to like disparage or, you know, diminish, but there is
literally there is a moment where she literally eats shit. It's not just a metaphor.
Right. That's what I was thinking of. So, I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of that like silliness to it in addition to being more female centric, I feel.
Yeah, I think it's the freedom to have that gross out humor, which is, it's real, it's relatable. We all go through moments which are not soft and lovely and perfect, and we go through moments which are like, ugh, why is that happening? Or, ooh. And so the feeling that women can have that too, girls go through that too, and that's part of the comedy, because I think that everything in life needs to be approached with a sense of humor, because if you don't find a way to find something funny, then it's going to be bad. I mean, like, you have to be able to, in my opinion, embrace all the different sides of what we go through in life. And I don't know, just the idea of like, since we haven't even discussed what the movie's about, Aubrey Plaza's character is an 18-year-old girl. She is a valedictorian, fresh out of high school, on her way to college, where she doesn't know what to expect. She has decided, because she has immediately fallen for a slightly older man in his 20s, Rusty Waters. Brandy decides that she is going to create a to-do list of all the sexual activities she has never done. And so there is a certain determination there, minus eroticism, as you pointed out when we were watching it. You thought it was almost a little painful, but I mean, but it's because she needs to do these things, and they're guys who she's not in love with. She doesn't even really like them that much. They're just numbers on the list, and she's going to do what she needs to do because it's all part of experience. And I find it really entertaining. I think that there's just as much validity in her doing that as any boy who you'd see in a comedy who would just, want to find girls. There's always this idea that a girl has to be more sensitive. She has to care more. It has to be more like, this is going to be a
meaningful
relationship. Yeah. Like a girl is supposed to do X, Y, and Z. But the reality is, I mean, we're all people. And, if you want to explore, if you want to figure out what's going on, and you don't want to be in love every single time with every random guy, then just do it. And so the idea that she just forges ahead and makes her way down the list, even though some of it is stuff she'll never want to do, probably. She just
doesn't even know what they are. She just writes down words. Yes. But that's part of the joy, because she doesn't know. Right.
And so she's going to figure it out. And sometimes it's enjoyable. Sometimes she's really not into it. But, that's life. I mean, sometimes you're in situations that end up being great, and sometimes you're like, well, okay, that was a learning experience. And so I think that's very true to life. I think that's part of what makes it great, because I think it would be false if it made her journey seem like every single thing went right all the time. Because actually, one of the things I thought about when we were watching, and I don't think I mentioned this, I was thinking a lot about romance novels and how there is this trope. This only partly applies to the movie, but there's a trope about how women in romance novels, either they've never had sex or they've been in one relationship. And that one relationship was bad. It was one man. He was the man she was in a relationship with or married to or whatever it was. And he was bad at sex, or he made it seem unimportant, or like pain was normal, or whatever it was. You just have to shut up and deal with it.
And then she meets, think of England. Yes. As the first. Yeah.
Yes. You just got to lie there and take it.
Yeah.
No care, no concern for what you're feeling. But then when she meets the man of her dreams, it all works perfectly. Like, it's all going to be amazing from the get. He knows what to do. She somehow figures out what to do without being told. And it's all magic. And that's not real. And I think Brandy's journey is one that feels real because it's awkward. It's going to be strange. She's going to have to call her sister to find out what to do. Like, there are all these different layers. She'll have to ask her mom. She'll have to weird out her dad by asking things. Like, that feels like, as ridiculous as it is sometimes, because there are a lot of situations where it's like, oh my God, I can't believe she just did that, or I can't believe she just saw that, or it feels fun. And I think that's the takeaway. I think there should be a way to tell a story about sex in movies and in life that is fun.
And that is highlighting the inherently ridiculous and or awkward element that sex is. Because, I mean, I had just come off of Falcon Lake.
Yes.
Which was so opposite this. Like, in terms of they're both coming of age, but like one of them is heavily romanticized.
Yes.
And heavily erotic, soft, you know, looking at things where the moonlight is shining and stuff. This movie is like
the anti, yes. It's not poetic. And there's a place for that too. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, I think that you need both aspects, because we can be so precious about it, to your point, so sacred about it, that it's almost scary.
Yeah.
Like a person can't feel like they can just be a person. Like that they have to be this ideal self, like what you're describing in the romance novels. Like, you know, it's almost a projection that's saying, unless you are perfect, you can't enjoy sex. And this movie is like, you can be the most fumbling, ordinary, you know, inexperienced person and laugh about it, and it still could have the same result as the other. You know, just on sort of a surface level. I don't think I believe this deep down, but like, at least to start, I feel like you have to have that attitude.
Because I think it's all about communication. I mean, Brandy's process of figuring out what feels good or what she wants to do is all about practice. And even though practice doesn't actually make perfect exactly, she's just figuring it out. And I think, you know, whether or not, I talked about this with you, she could eventually be in a relationship. She may eventually meet the person she wants to be with. That's not really clear if that'll happen at the end of the movie. It could, it may not, but she will eventually get there when she feels like it's right. But for now, she's just a teenager. And as she says, regrets are for your 30s. So she's just going to do what she does because she's a kid. She is young. And so I think it's really fun and freeing to see that she is just learning the same way everybody has to learn. And you don't have to be great at it at first. And the person you're with may not be great at it. And that's realistic too. And you just kind of have to see what happens. And actually, this is a great segue to a review I have.
Oh, here we go. I was going to ask you another question, so I'm going to hold it in my brain while you're doing this. Go ahead.
So, well, actually, I have two reviews, because I have one review that is really positive and really just like so championing what this movie is about. Jen Chaney, who wrote for RogerEbert.com, wrote this great piece called "She Doesn't Give a Damn About Her Bad Reputation, Why the To-Do List is Revolutionary."
Okay.
And she mentions, Brandy treats her love life the way very few girls in movies have before. She is not interested in a relationship or even having any legitimate feelings. Well, I don't think that's true. She kind of has feelings toward the end.
Okay, that's okay, Jen.
Instead, she approaches intimacy with an emotionally distant persistence and refusal to apologize that echoes the methodology used by so many boys in so many teen movies from decades past. Carrie reminds us over and over that it's the female who's now calling the shots, not the male, flipping the script on on-screen interactions we've seen before in funny, subversive ways. The to-do list does not imply that every teenage girl should immediately drop what she's doing and pursue unbridled megacoitus, but it does send the clear message that a woman's body and sexual appetites are entirely hers to control. It says that sometimes sex is special, and sometimes it's disastrous, and ultimately most of us turn it into way too big a deal. Maybe because we've seen far too many movies about what a big deal it is. But most importantly, 30 years after the teen sex genre first hit its first climax, the to-do list reaffirms that women have the same needs as all those copulation-crazed boys, the same power to pursue those needs, and finally the clout to write, direct, and star in a comedy in which they assert that power. Brandy Clark, she wants nothing to do with blurred lines. She's too busy drawing the lines clearly and confidently herself.
Yes.
So I love that.
Yeah,
but I also have a very negative review.
Okay.
So this is from...
I love how you ended on the negative one, Jet.
Well, but I wanted the contrast. Because this is from Mick LaSalle, who was writing for the...
A man.
I didn't actually get it. I think it's the San Francisco Gate. Mick LaSalle has been writing for decades. I mean, he's a very trusted, respected critic. He hated this movie. Hated it.
I'm ready. I want to know why.
He called it vile and unfunny.
Oh my gosh.
Basically, he didn't like that it was sexy. He didn't like that it wasn't sexy. He didn't like that it wasn't erotic.
Right. Which I understand.
Because it's a romantic comedy with no romance and little comedy. I don't think it's a romantic comedy. I mean, that's like right off
I think it's just a comedy, straight up.
Yeah, he said that these characters are all horrible. The protagonist is horrible. Her sister is horrible. Her friends are horrible. And when she gets a job, her boss is horrible. Not funny horrible, just horrible. Okay, Mick. So one of the major problems is a matter of comedy. A teenage boy trying to lose his virginity has more potential for laughs, if only because the task is potentially difficult and requires the cooperation of a willing partner. Yeah, don't they all? Someone who must somehow be persuaded. If the boy is ardent but inept, that's comedy. Conversely, a girl who decides to engage in a sexual act faces virtually no obstacle. Okay. She can practically pick a name out of a hat, and barring bad luck, she will have success.
That's great.
Okay. I mean, he literally wrote, she is a cold, unpleasant control freak. And she ends up a colder, more unpleasant control freak. Okay,
wait a second. Now, Jetta, I have to stop you because this is an interesting point, and I think a lot of men think this. No. Maybe women too.
Yeah.
What is your stance on the idea that, like, a guy trying to lose his virginity would have a tough time, whereas a woman can lose her virginity at any time? Because that is something that a lot of people actually believe, whether they're conscious of that or not.
I think the best way to approach this is that everybody can have difficulty, because the idea that a woman will not have any difficulty, all she has to do is say yes, and she'll just get a guy. But that's only as far as, like, who you might want to spend that time with. That has nothing to do with, like, the physical ability to have sex. Like, you don't just open your legs and, like, whoop, it's gonna happen. I mean, like, you have no way of knowing until you actually put effort into it and thought into it and get to know your body better. How will this actually work? Because it can be painful. And if you're with someone who doesn't know what they're doing and doesn't communicate with you, that could be worse. And the idea that, you know, all a woman has to do is just lie back and it happens is not right. I mean, everyone has both emotional and physical components that have to do with having sex. So it's not just like you say yes and it works. Like,
I think I hear what you're saying exactly, and I think what you're talking about is like a deeper level of readiness. Whereas what I think the perception in general is that the availability is, like,
I think that's ridiculous. I don't know.
Accessibility is there.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, like, everyone can go through difficulties in terms of connecting. If all Mick LaSalle means is, like, will the boy get an erection? Well, maybe. Okay, sure. Like, if that's the only problem, all right, yeah, but, like, it's not as... He makes it sound like for women, it's just not the same kind of issue, but I think women can have the same issues, just in a different way. And so the comedy of, you know, a guy trying to lose his virginity and... oh, what's going to happen? Will she say yes? Will he have to fuck the pie? I mean, like, American Pie is the standard, right? Like, great. But, you know, women have questions. They have concerns, too. There's that whole section in the to-do list where Brandy doesn't really know what masturbation is, so she has to figure it out. And it's like, yikes. Like, she's got to really work on that.
I was about to say maybe this is a contrast of quantity over quality here, because maybe the point is that for male comedies in this milieu or vein are about just doing it, no matter what the quality is, right? Just getting it done, basically. And then for women, maybe the emphasis is typically more like, I actually want this to be a good experience. I actually want to be able to enjoy myself and feel like I know my body well enough to even do that, because it's kind of hard to enjoy oneself when you don't even know what that feels like. Like you're saying, she had to learn,
right.
basically.
And this also makes me reflect a lot on when I was that age, because I would not have known anything about what I was doing at all. It took me years and years to even feel comfortable in my body, to even have any understanding of, like, what I would want to do, what I could do. Like, I was just totally out of it. Like, I had no confidence and no sense that I even liked my body. Like, it was just terrible. And so, like, if I had been in a situation at that age where I even had the opportunity to be with someone, I would have been just like, well, he must have more experience than me. I'll leave it to him. And of course, that's not good, because you shouldn't ever leave everything all up to the other person. There's supposed to be communication. And so,
yeah,
I guess the ultimate point is, I love that the to-do list is about communication. It's not soft, it is not romantic, but it is about communicating desires, and it is about a girl going on this journey of figuring out what she wants to do, how this will impact her friendships, because there's also, of course, friends, and the difficulties and irritations of, what if I steal your guy? Like, what happens? Even though you're really not dating, so I don't know what happens. There are all these little melodramas, and I think it's just really kind of sweet. Like, it doesn't feel sweet all the time. It feels so raunchy and out there, but it's nice because it's about the real comedies and not tragedies, but I mean, they don't always go great in these situations. But it's just fun, and I like that. And I feel like this is something that everyone should watch, because it shouldn't feel unusual for there to be a sex comedy about a girl, and like, wow, she's really out there. And it's really, even though I just used the phrase out there, but it's not really, like, it's not that outrageous. So I
think also you're hitting a note of, like, it's not just communication, it's like blunt.
Yes.
Like, she is very much like you and I think, and that's why I think that's why we gravitated towards Poor Things as well.
Yes.
That sort of blunt, very blunt, because her sister's like, why did you just say that at the breakfast table? Or
it's
like,
9 a.m.
why didn't you just lie? But she doesn't lie.
Right.
She doesn't really sugarcoat. She just comes out and says it. And I think that we are kind of reminding me of 8th grade in the opposite way, where she is so, she's younger, but she's so shy. She's so unsure that she doesn't even want to ask, and she hides everything, and everything is so internalized. And I think that if we treat sexuality and just like even talking about like our own bodies and what our own desires in a way that feels shame or a way that is guarded, it really stifles the entire process from even occurring, and then obviously produces a sort of barrier between us and the person, which makes it impossible.
Exactly. I love that. I mean, I never ever would have had the confidence to do what Brandy does when I was that age, but I think there is something so empowering and inspirational about the idea that she's just going to do exactly what she wants to do, and she's okay with it. And there's never any point when she's unsure. There's never any point when she doubts what she's doing, really. I mean, like, there are little, like, embarrassments, like when the guy who's in love with her, well, he's very sensitive. Yes, he's in love with her just because she gave him a hand job. I mean, like, he thinks they're dating. He thinks that they're together.
Yeah.
Which is sweet. But he thinks way more of it than it is. And he has no concept of, like, why she wants to do this or what her intentions are. And she hasn't been super clear with him either. And so it's about them both learning and figuring out, well, some of this is great. Some of this is like, mistakes along the way. And in the end, it'll work itself out, because again, they are just 18 years old, and it's not like life or death. So
it also highlights something that you and I frequently talk about, which is this idea of being too much, where like in movies, when the woman or girl is very self-assured, organized, like a go-getter, not just about this topic, but anything, the guy is almost scared.
Yes.
Or like afraid, or they don't know how to handle it. Despite the fact that like men say like that's what they want. I mean,
yes.
when it comes down to it, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to be brave right now. And then they're like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
You know,
what are you doing? Why are you being
doing
like this? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Think about poor things. Think about the fact that Duncan in that movie feels like he's in control, and like when he's teaching Bella everything, he has all the power. And, you know, he's the best man she could ever know because he's the only man she's ever known. And when she actually gets more experience, when she's in that whole Paris section of the movie and she's doing what she does, sometimes for pleasure and sometimes there's no pleasure in it. She's just, you know, working at the brothel, having this experience, and he cannot let go of her. He cannot leave her because even though she said, it's over, you're out of here, he can't let go because he has actually made more of the situation than there was. And he thinks he has rights to her. He thinks that he should be able to have her back again, even though he is the worst. I mean, people get ideas sometimes because they can't communicate and they get, you know, I don't know, they perceive things weirdly. So, you know, communication is ultimately the most important thing in this movie and just in life. And so I love thinking about that, and I love having a reason to talk about it. Communicating about communication.
And I think that the point is that it's like the best case scenario is two very secure, fearless individuals coming together. Yeah, like literally like that there isn't like this power imbalance, like what you're saying, because it can be that. And then one person is very insecure or they're very clingy and they're worried about losing the person. Whereas the ideal scenario is just like, we're both confident in ourselves and enough about this to where we can speak very clearly, but there's not this like one-upsmanship or like, you know, experienced older guy like the romance novel and then virgin.
Yeah.
And it could be either gender. I mean, there's lots of movies where it's like the boy is the virgin and the older woman, it's usually an older woman, is the one teaching them things. And so, I mean,
and that's never perceived as wrong or traumatic. Generally, that's always like, wow, look at this great experience he's having. So,
unless we're in like May December territory, which I still don't think you've seen.
That's different because that's talking about someone who was way too young to consent. I mean, if it's more like, I mean, this is a gray area, and like people can have different feelings about it. But when you're talking more about someone who's 17, 18, then it becomes more like they're on the verge of adulthood. I mean, I think with all of these stories, it's always also super interesting to think about how, like, the frontal lobe is not even developed till you're 25. So, I mean, young people make mistakes. They're also vulnerable. And that's something we're going to talk about with the next movie.
So the next film is The Diary of a Teenage Girl, which is directed by Marielle Heller, who did Can You Ever Forgive Me, but also the movie about Mr. Rogers, which I love.
Won't You Be My
Beautiful
Neighbor?
Day in the Neighborhood. Well, oh no, that's the doc.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, it's the Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Yes.
Right.
I only know this for a fact because I saw it in the theater 5 times and cried my eyes out. I love that movie inexplicably.
Yeah, she's a wonderful director.
She's wonderful, and I thought that you would like this, not just because I knew you would relate to the main character, but also because it's so artsy and it infuses so much of her creativity and like, and I thought that that would resonate. Well, it resonates with me, but especially I thought it would resonate with your spirit as well.
Yeah, I like the fact that without even, I mean, I didn't think about it till just now. Maybe you thought about it when picking the film, but both of these films are period pieces. And yet, even though they're
period pieces.
But even though that's true, they also feel relevant to now. It's not like they only apply to, in this case, the wild 70s. I feel like there are aspects of this that are timeless. They're just as true now.
Good point, because Diary of a Teenage Girl does take place in the 70s, and it has a little bit more of she's 15 and she has a relationship with, I don't know how old Alexander Skarsgård is, but he's old.
He was,
like
I think, 35 when he made
35?
it. Yeah.
And they don't even really, it's not really that taboo because it's the 70s. Whereas if it had been later, it would have been much more an issue.
Yeah. I mean, I think that because it's San Francisco, there is this sense of anything goes, like
bohemian.
Yes, they're a little bit hippie-ish. They're into the culture that has a certain freedom and liberation that makes it feel like it's still taboo, but not as taboo as if it were a different community. So it's kind of a yes and a no in that sense.
Right. And this one is less so geared, well, first of all, it's a lot more serious.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, it's more about her experimenting more spontaneously, I would say, whereas Aubrey Plaza's Brandy is like organized and like very type A.
A high achiever, yes.
Yeah, mission oriented.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think her name's Minnie. Or Mina. Minnie. She is a lot more free spirited. She's kind of going with whomever,
mm-hmm.
whom she meets, as opposed to being very structured about it. So in that sense, the looseness of it is there, which feels more 70s anyway.
Yeah, and also I think the main difference between the two for me is that Minnie actually feels love, like with these, at least with the one main relationship. She is younger than Brandy. Minnie is supposed to be 15, I think. And I think she is even more vulnerable to the idea that sex equals love immediately. And so when she has all this attention from Monroe, who is her mother's boyfriend, she thinks that all that attention means, oh my God, he's in love with me the way I'm in love with him. And I think it's really interesting that a lot of people watch this movie and they can only see the age gap and they can only see how wrong it is that he's doing this. They don't quite see from her perspective, she's doing this because she thinks this is the right thing to do. And that is the way the girls think at that age. She wants all the attention. She is very curious about sex. And so it makes sense from her perspective that she wants to pursue this. But I don't think it's ever condoning what he's doing, because he is always like, you're a child. But at the same time, he does it because he loves that she's available to him. So I think the movie is very
he's drunk half the time.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not really trying to, this is kind of the licorice pizza thing, although that's different because they're closer in age, I suppose. But I get very like, ugh, come on. I mean, I'm not trying to say that like I'm blasé about it if it were happening in real life. Right. But at the same time, this is not the entire, it shouldn't hijack the entire value or conversation, because what's so interesting about this movie is how the experience she has, she funnels them into her drawings and then they like literally come alive. Yes. Like what she's feeling when she's in love, it's transformed it. She wants to be like
a cartoonist.
A comic.
Yeah.
Right, a cartoonist. And so everything is funneled through that lens, which makes it just so much more, I don't know, compelling to me than just like a girl writing in her diary. She's also like recording what she's saying about her experiences. It's important to her to have like a sort of log,
right?
Of like chaptering her journey, like so many girls do. I mean, with scrapbooking and journaling and all of that stuff, that's very stereotypical girl behavior, girl in love behavior. So I just think that it captures that essence very, very well.
Yeah. And I think it's also really interesting that as much as she appreciates all of the attention that Monroe is lavishing on her, she also recognizes how bad it is that he doesn't want her to pursue her dreams, because when she shows her cartoons to him, he's like, that's weird. Like, don't do that. Like, don't show people that. And so
they'll be offended.
Yeah, like he has this perception, even though what they're doing is taboo and would not be accepted by people probably, he has all these opinions, like he can tell her what to do and like what she's doing is wrong. And it's like, well, what position are you in to do that? And like, if she wants to pursue this, she should. And she also has a different version of that, I wrote in my review, about how when she decides to change tactics and go after a boy her own age, he also has problems because he does not understand how to have sex with her. I mean, we don't see the whole entire scene, but from what we see of it, he's just doing whatever he wants. Like, he obviously didn't ask her what she would like, what would feel good to her. He's just going off, and, you know, whenever he comes, that's it. That's it. And so the idea that when she wants to show him, she gets on top and wants to show him, this will feel good for me. He's like, excuse me. Like, he can't believe.
He has no idea.
He cannot, it's like he can't even conceive of the idea that she would feel pleasure from this, or that she would know her own body enough to be able to tell him what feels good. She is supposed to lie back there and just feel it, and that's it. And so, you know, it's interesting how guys of every age, as this movie will show us, they can be insensitive and they can be unknowing. And that's the value of communication. Look at the way that Monroe breaks down and cries in her lap because he's drunk, right? Like, he sees her as a caretaker, even though she's so much younger than him. He wants someone to take care of him when he's, like, gone off on a bender. I mean, I don't know. It's fascinating to me because it is so sensitive in a way that the to-do list is not, but it is also about a journey. It is also about figuring out, this is just one chapter in my life, and I will move on from this. I will take things away from these experiences, but they're not going to define me forever. It's just one part of figuring out where I will go in adulthood. And I think that's really beautiful. I think it's a really, really, like, I cried a little toward the end because I thought it was so moving. And even just the tiny detail of right toward the end, when Minnie says in voiceover how her mother thinks that she needs a man to complete her, but Minnie realizes she doesn't necessarily need that. And that's not to say she won't change her mind, because she is 15. I mean, who knows what will happen in the future, but there's just something so wonderful about being able to recognize lives outside of your own, and how all kinds of people have all kinds of different, you know, ways of seeing the world. And that's just going to inform her art. It's going to make her an even better artist. It's going to make her an even better person, because she is now thinking about how other people respond to life. So yeah, I thought it was fantastic. And I was so glad you picked it.
I'm so glad that you loved it. And then also, I think for me, I thought of you in the scene in the bar where they're dancing, and she says, you know, her mom is just constantly needing that next fix, really. Yeah. It's just constantly needing that next relationship. And she concludes, like, I don't need this. But then to me, her most powerful moment is when she shakes his hand. And like at the end, she shakes Monroe's hand like her father taught her. And she's like, I'm better than you.
You son of a bitch.
Like, in her head. And it's not that, you know, that could be seen as like another power dynamic. I'm not trying to preach, like, I am very, very much for equality. I am not at all feminist in the way that would say, like, we're better than men, yada, 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 etc. But I am saying that being able to say in your mind that you are not less than doesn't necessarily have to be that you're better than, although I do understand where I understand that desire in that moment. I do. And there is a certain value to distinguishing yourself from others in a way that gives you freedom,
autonomy,
even if that's just a free feeling. But I think that is the moment of change where she's like, I'm okay, and I can say goodbye to you. Like, she can shake his hand, and whether he bought her drawing or not, it doesn't matter. She still just gives it to him, and her happiness is not based on anything at that point. Like her mother, her father, him, the future. She's just content, I think. And it ends on that note.
Yeah.
So
she doesn't need to keep him in her life to make him more than he is. Right? So yeah, I think that's a wonderful way to end. And the way that it ends with running on the beach. I mean, I just feel like this is it was an important thing for her to go through, and I don't think that she regrets it, or not all of it. And she'll take that and move on to the next chapter.
What do you think about, because this is something that stuck out to me, and I think it's possibly emblematic of the way that a lot of us are in dating and relationships. I'm curious what your thought is on this, though. There's a line that she says when he's crying in her lap, that now that she has him and he loves her, and it's exactly what she thought she wanted, that she has no interest in him whatsoever. Like that her interest in him is completely gone. What do you think about the idea of, like, I don't know, just having almost a learning curve of being like, we get so obsessed, or can get so obsessed with the pursuit of people, that when you finally get what you think you want, or the fantasy becomes reality,
right?
It's disappointing. Like, what do you think about that?
Well, I think in her case, because there was such an age gap between them, I think she just assumed that as an adult, he knew everything. He was confident in himself. He wasn't trying to figure things out in the way that she is. And so the idea that he could have this breakdown, that he has this vulnerability, that he would have maybe an addiction, that just like throws her for a loop. I mean, she can't believe it because she thinks that it's only as a teenager that she has to go through these changes and confusions. And I think it does, it breaks the fantasy for her to realize that he is just a guy, and he is a guy who is having sex with his girlfriend's daughter. And it's like, this is not the fantasy she thought it was. It's real. And like now she has to think about, because like think about how the mother is so angry at the end finding out about this relationship. She's like, yeah, you should get married. And it's like, of course she doesn't mean it, but she's like, she's so furious and so frustrated. And it makes Minnie realize, yeah, I would not want to be married to him. I wouldn't actually want this. Like, first of all, I'm 15, but even if we waited, like, it's not ideal. It's not what I actually want. This is just a moment in my life. It's just like a drop in the bucket. So, I mean, it's hard to say. Of course, like every relationship you go through in life is different, but I don't know. I guess I just, over time, I've realized, because I do think that I was a lot like that when I was younger, as far as fantasizing about the ideal relationship and what I would ideally want, what somebody else could be for me. Because, of course, I also had that low, non-existent self-esteem. I thought I wasn't going to give anything. I thought there was nothing I could offer, or like nothing physical. So I think it takes time to figure those things out and to realize that people are who they are. They're flawed. They've got issues. They've got wonderful things about them. And I think over time, you just learn more and more to let go of that feeling of fantasy and realize that there's nothing wrong with reality. Because I think we're so often conditioned to feel like it has to be a fantasy. It has to be perfect. It has to be, I know, poetic. It has to be like the most beautiful, perfect thing. But that's not life. Life is about like finding who you're interested in, someone who's interested in you. You can communicate. And if it works out, that's great. If it doesn't, that happens. And so I don't know. I think for me, that's a great thing, because I'm glad that I'm becoming more realistic. There's nothing wrong with that. I think if I were younger, I'd be like, oh no, realism, like it would be heartbreaking or something, but that's fine. It's a good thing, because that makes me feel like I'm becoming more and more a part of the world and not just in my own head. So it's a very long-winded way of answering.
No, I think that you're hitting on something that I think I'm also finding to be true, which is that the more that you're embracing reality and what actually is happening, and the less that you're living sort of in your head, even in a daydream sense like she does. As much as because I loved this movie when I first saw it, and I think that I loved it more than I did this second time, just because I was in a similar state to her, and now I'm not as much. So I have like a separateness, whereas before I was like, oh, she's me. Like I felt very, very, very much at the same sort of place as her. And now I'm like, oh, that was me. And that's actually a very dark place to be in the end, to be so emotionally tied to someone that you have a bit of an identity crisis when you're separated, and to be so dependent on it. Like they feel like they can't stop. I know that feeling very well. And so seeing it now was like, I was a little bit repelled, and which is good.
Yeah,
I think
it can happen,
because it's you want to be in reality, not the fantasy, as alluring as it is.
Right.
And I think that's what the movie is saying.
Well, I think sometimes when we have personal experiences that color how we view movies, that can be fantastic because we relate so hard, but then sometimes it feels impossible to extricate yourself from that feeling because you're just so tied to understanding what that is that it hurts, and it makes you appreciate the movie less because you can't enjoy it. You can't. So there's always this fine line of figuring out how your own personal experience is going to color what you watch positively or negatively. But I think that ultimately we go through things in life, and when they teach us something, if it's positive, if it hurts, whatever it is, as long as we can learn from it, that's ultimately what matters. And I know that I've gone through a lot of things that felt like they hurt, and sometimes they were fantastic, and I try to view them all as helpful. And I think you can attest to that too. It's a journey, and it's like our whole Letterboxd diaries show that. Like everything we watch, everything we take in, the messages we take in from movies, the emotions we put into why we watch the movies we watch. We might as well call this series The Diary of a Woman. I mean, it's like we're all going through these things, and I don't know. I mean, it's a great thing. It can be wonderful, it can be horrible, but it is ultimately real.
And Jetta is my absolute optimist, my go-to optimist for any time.
You always say I'm an optimist. I don't know if I am.
You are. And you have so much, like, anytime that I am irritated or come at you with a complaint or something that I'm just like, I've got all this self-righteous fury about, you're like, well, Amy, but this is good. And then this could be a good thing.
I used to be so cynical. I feel like how could I be so different? Like I was always because I was always so negative about myself. I don't know. I guess this is what therapy can do for you. I don't know.
You have broken through. You have come into the light, and it is very inspiring to me because it just recenters. It also illustrates the fact that your outlook can affect your life. Like you don't have control over so many things, but you do have a say in how you interpret events, and like whether you see them as negative to you or positive to you, whether you see them as harmful or instructive. Take like you just wrote about going to the ER, and you could have, my reaction to you texting me and telling me that was fear, and like that I was very concerned about you. But then it was like, okay, but how could this be good? Is there a way that it could be? And that's how your brain, that's your way that you have, I think, disciplined your brain to go. It's not the natural way, but it is the way that you have trained yourself to be. And I think that is ideal. Like that is aspirational.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that there can't be stress and anxiety when you're going through it, because that was super stressful.
Right.
Very like
scary.
When you feel like you don't have control over your body, you don't have an understanding of what's happening, you think there could be something really serious going on. That is terrifying. But then when you find that you can get through the experience, and maybe you're even stronger than you knew, and I mean, I don't know. I came away from that feeling somehow like a better version of myself. And
yes,
I cannot say that happens for everyone who goes to an ER, but it felt very, very weirdly empowering. And so, I mean, I try to look at it from that way. So maybe I am an optimist.
You are, Jetta. Trust me. You are.
You have to be. I guess you have to be optimistic to take risks and adventure, and I don't know.
It's the same spirit in which we saw Bella Baxter. It's that same wide-eyed, bright-eyed hopefulness where you're wanting to come into the world and feel like you can embrace it, that it's like waiting for you, that there's opportunities that are unexpected that could come around any corner, and that you have the fortitude and the wherewithal to handle it, even if you are completely new. And it's the way that I think that we're both like coming around to being, which is after a lot of work, so it feels very deserved.
Yeah, it takes a ton of work. I know that,
Mhm.
you know that. We both understand the value of therapy, of friendship, of like being able to just embrace
Have an
talking
outlet.
openly. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I think that the artistic emphasis in Diary of a Teenage Girl and almost the like type A-ness of the high achiever is infused into this like person that I think we both feel that we are at core, which is I can handle anything, but also there's this like insatiable curiosity and this like moving towards others as opposed to wanting to withdraw. There is that withdrawal part, but it's ultimately like moving towards and it becoming stronger because of the feedback that you receive. That gives you even more boldness.
Yeah, I feel like I could see a lot of myself in the to-do list, and I could see a lot of you in the Diary of a Teenage Girl. So in that way,
that's how I
it was a
felt.
perfect mesh of those
Merge.
two.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
This is the goal of the show is like, I want the first film to be the person. And then the second film, my response to them that I feel is more me. And then like balancing it out so that we can actually learn from where the other one is coming from. Because all the movies that you picked with that for that episode with AJ, like Shirley MacLaine, Jane Fonda, they were so you. And they're that part of you that's very brazen and it's a little bit different than I am. And I like that sort of like.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes people think too brazen, which is like
bossiness.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to learn not to mind too much about that.
No, it's great. I it's kind of like don't shy away, don't shrink. That's a quote by James McAvoy of all people, but it is that. It's like just embrace your inner, I don't know, lioness. Not to get
I am a Leo.
Yeah. That's right. You're a Leo. Okay, perfect. We're gonna end there.
Okay.
Jetta, pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for launching this with me. I am excited. I think that whomever I have on will be a joy for you too. I know I'll be talking with you behind the scenes for all of this, so I just feel like your presence is going to be in the series the whole time, whether you're here or not.
Good.
And thank you for bringing your
a pleasure to talk about pleasure. Right?
Yes. Everyone take your pleasure seriously.
Yes.
With that, we'll see you at the movies.